Okay. Good evening. Welcome everybody, and a very happy new year. This is the January meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board at BCP Council. I am Councillor Kate Salmon in the chair, and I'd like to hand over first of all to the Democratic Services Officer to read the housekeeping notice.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast, and it will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 1 on our agenda is apologies. As I understand it, we have received apologies from Councillor Claire Waite and Councillor Leslie Dedman, and no other apologies, I think. Is that correct?
No other apologies, no.
Then substitute members, which is item 2, we have Councillor Nanovo substituting for Councillor Waite, so welcome Councillor Nanovo. Thank you. Councillor Wright, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear you.
Oh, we can hear you.
Are you
don't know that. What?
Are you speaking to me? I'm not sure.
Can we write to him that we can hear him?
Yeah, look in the chat.
No, he just said he can't hear us, so could we just reply that we can?
Does he have his mute off?
He looks like he's muted.
Is he muted? Yes, he's muted.
He is now.
For anybody watching online, apologies, we're having a few technical difficulties with a member attending online.
It looks like you're muted, Gavin.
That wouldn't be why you can't hear.
Oh no, that's true. That's weird. Are we muted?
Could we suggest to Councillor Wright in the chat that he leave and come back and see if that fixes it?
That's a good idea.
Oh, have you fixed it?
I don't know.
Councillor Wright, can you hear us? Oh, he's gone. Oh, he might be back in a minute. Okay, we'll carry on. Apologies, everybody. Item 3 is declarations of interest. So can I ask whether any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests to declare on any items on the agenda? I'm not seeing any indications, so we will move on to confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. And could I see if we have consensus to accept those as a correct record of the previous meeting? Lovely, thank you very much. Those are confirmed. For the next item then is the recommendation tracker. This is an item for information. But if anyone has any comments or queries, now's the time to raise them. So I'll just see if anyone has anything they wanted to mention on that. There are 2 items which do require a follow-up from portfolio holders, and I believe that, am I right, Claire, that you had tried to get hold of those, but due to the Christmas break, it's been a little bit tricky to get a response. Those responses were due between Christmas and New Year, so we can appreciate that the time frame is a bit tricky and maybe give them a bit of leeway. I wonder if, as we have got the leader here, whether she might be able to follow up on those with the relevant cabinet members for us. That would be great, and just remind them that we haven't had those couple of responses. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, we have public issues. We've had no public petitions or questions. We have one public statement, and I don't see the person here. So would you read out the statement for us, please, Claire?
Of course, Chair. Yes, I was expecting Miss Stockwell to attend, who submitted the statement, but as she isn't here, I will read it out on her behalf.
Thank you.
This relates to agenda item 10, which is the board's work plan. The workload of this board could usefully include consideration of the impact of licensing strip clubs on council functions, including but not limited to regeneration and community safety, and the capacity for those departments to properly lodge objections. In addition, please consider adding a general review of the estates function, including but not limited to maintenance, fund seeking, planning and other statutory compliance and availability of standard responses to commercial inquiries as part of the conveyancing, letting and licensing process.
Okay, so I'd like to thank Mrs. Stockwell for that statement, and if I may just briefly mention, I think we can usefully take that forward to our work programming, which we'll be doing over the next couple of months, and add that to our discussions as a contribution from the public.
He's still got no sound.
Apparently, Councillor Wright is still struggling with his sound. So,
If you want to, we could adjourn. Have a look at it.
shall we just take a very brief adjournment, see if we can sort it out, and be back in? We'll be back in a couple of minutes. So, apologies, but I think we better try and sort that out for him. Thanks.
And we're back live.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for that disruption to the meeting. We are now back, and we will move on to item 7, information considered between meetings. We have the Q2 performance monitoring report, which all members should have received a copy of or a link to. This was an item included to ensure that we retain a record of all the information that is shared with the board, and it is just for us to keep an eye on any issues that we might want to bring forward. But I don't suggest we discuss that here unless anyone has any seriously burning points they'd want to raise on it. Okay, moving on then to item 8, which is the regeneration progress report. So we have here to present this Councillor Millie Earle, the leader of the council, and also Amina Matin, the Director of Investment and Development. Just a quick note on this one. Initially, this was meant to be a pre-cabinet decision item, but in December, the regeneration items that were going to cabinet in January were removed from the forward plan, and I imagine the leader might tell us a bit more about that in a moment. So this at that point it was decided we would keep the item on the agenda and we would have a progress update report on the whole kind of regeneration topic. So that's what we've got before us today, and I shall hand over then to the leader to present.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon, and Happy New Year to everyone on the committee. So just to start on that point, we had initially had sort of scheduled regeneration reports coming to overview and scrutiny, and this report is one of those reports which looks in a very broad sense at what we have within the Regeneration Directorate and what we're trying to deliver, and a bit of an update on all those sites that are included. One of the reasons why I didn't want to do it as a pre-cabinet report is because we don't currently have any decisions to make at cabinet, and I feel it's almost like it gives scrutiny a bit of an opportunity to maybe decide what areas they want to look at closer, be able to feed into regeneration in its broadest sense, and not sort of be beholden to a decision that is has already had lots of thought given to it, that will then go on to cabinet. So I hope that it's taken in the spirit that it's meant, which is to really be an invitation to, if scrutiny do want to look at any of the sites in further detail, or want anything specific, then I'm very happy to come back, and then all those other, as each individual sites progress and there's decisions to be made around them, then they can come through scrutiny in the normal way, in the normal democratic process, and then be decided at cabinet or council. So the report, it's to update on the regeneration ambition and strategy for those priority sites which we identified. So Hulls Bay Power Station, Paul Dolphin Leisure Centre, the BDC site, so in particular the Winter Gardens and the Boscombe Towns Fund. It also includes in this report a progress on the property assets for all those that were brought in-house in November 2023 when Future Places was closed down. So it gives an update on how those have progressed, where they are now, just to try and sort of finish some of those that have been hanging around for a while with us thinking that something was going to happen. A lot of them have been disposed of and so on, but I'll talk about them a little bit later. I think the vision is really important here in delivering that inclusive and sustainable regeneration. We have a real focus on our town centres, making sure we're doing all we can to boost economic growth, but also thinking about housing affordability. And we've taken quite a housing-led regen approach so far, and I think that is very much evident within this paper, but also considering things like our corporate strategy around environment and place and people and communities, and making sure that that is the base for all of our decisions across the council, as well as regeneration. We do have we have things like the BCP growth plan, which is currently in production, and we also have devolution in the background as well. And I think that they are quite important for the context of regeneration, so I might touch on those as well. But I would welcome the committee to look at it in that broad sense as we kind of move towards a different way of governance across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, with those things on the horizon. So as a council, we are a place leader, but we are also an investor in these sites. I read the other day that BCP Council owns over £2 billion worth of assets or something crazy like that, and it made me suddenly think, oh my gosh, you know, we are the leaders of place in our communities because we own so much, we run so much, we lease so much, and we deliver so much for our communities. And really our role is around aligning planning, infrastructure, but also balancing that against our social and economic priorities and also our environmental priorities. We actually have the potential to deliver 3,000 homes on council land. We also have 9,000 homes which are stalled within the planning system, but we have an ambitious housing revenue account which councillors will be aware of because it came to full council, where we want to deliver over 900 homes through mixed delivery models, which will be coming over the next 9 to 10 years. The regeneration strategy itself is flexible. Like I said, it prioritises those key sites while planning for that long-term growth for those more complex sites that we have. And we do not have a shortage of complex sites here in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, not least because of the fantastic environment that we have. Apologies, I've got a bit of a cough still. But you know, we live in a very unique part of the country, in fact, part of the world. We have a lot of things to balance when it comes to development and build. Everyone will know that from the local plan process and the constraints that we have when it comes to redevelopment, but also regeneration in making sure that we're working in harmony with the natural environment. That's why we are really focusing on development within town centres to try and intensify those areas, create much more focused living on the town centre in an attempt to also boost our high streets and make sure that they have a purpose in themselves that is beyond just visiting retail, because we know that high streets have suffered a lot over the years, but also enhancing like the characters of our towns, making sure there are activities, there's things happening, that we're creating and delivering jobs, and that people are finding town centres in particular, really worthwhile places to live with lots of things happening and lots of services on the doorstep. It is really important to consider the challenging financial environment, and you'll see from the report it goes into that in quite some depth. Obviously, I'm sure councillors are all aware of the rising borrowing costs that we have. We have lots of limits within the market at the moment. We've settled on an approach that partnership is going to be really, really important with these regeneration sites. And I think we were there last year when we were talking about this. But a lot of the sites that we have in our regeneration portfolio are not going to be deliverable just by us as a council. I mean, we would be looking at borrowing to do that, and councillors are aware that our revenue budget is extremely tight. I certainly don't want to be adding things to our MTFP and increasing the risk on this council. I think that is not the right thing to do at the moment. So for regeneration, the partnership approach, working with those enablers, working with organisations like Homes England, for example, who we have cultivated a really positive working relationship with, they are going to be essential for funding infrastructure, complex developments, and also bringing forward the much needed homes that we have. I would also say that there's that wider private sector investment as well. And a lot of the conferences I've been to over the last year, for example, UK Reef, and looking at regeneration in every sense of the word, and also government policy, I would say, is looking at that partnership between sort of local government, central government or Homes England, and also private sector partnership. And last time I was here, I talked at length about, you know, when we had the BDC paper, about how I think that having a joint venture is a real asset to us in BCP. And I think it's looking for more ways in which we can take forward these sites with in that sort of triad, that those three working together. And I think that's really critical, considering that I think risk appetite for borrowing at the moment in this council is rather low, considering where we are. I wanted to mention as well around devolution. We have in fact, it was this time last year, possibly to the day, maybe a couple of days off. But BCP Council voted to join the Wessex Partnership, which is Somerset, Wiltshire, Dorset, and us, to create a devolution partnership. We submitted that to government. Government unfortunately said no, but we do know that the policy is very much that England at some point will be covered by English strategic mayoral authorities. So we have been working within those 4 local authorities as leaders and also as officers to look at things like spatial development strategies, our environmental strategy, things like rewilding infrastructure, growth, skills, to really try and move forward a lot of what we want to achieve eventually when we do get granted devolution. And a big part of that as well for me is strategic regeneration. So we're not just looking now at the context of just BCP, we're also not looking at the context of Dorset and the LEP, and that used to exist as an organisation across Dorset to drive growth. We're now looking at that wider piece actually around how our area relates to those other county areas and how we work together to get the much needed regeneration that we need across not just here but strategically across that whole partnership area, and work together to pull the levers within government to make sure we are getting heard. The paper also mentions the core principles and of what we want to achieve through regeneration, and I would really encourage councillors to look at that and see if there's anything that you think we're missing amongst those. It is really around trying to build that social value into the schemes so that we're not just delivering, you know, in terms of value for money, but we're also looking at wider community benefit, environmental benefit, social benefit of these regeneration projects. And that will be a really key theme when we do bring forward those papers, that we're looking in a wider sense at what benefits that can bring. And I think we're very lucky as a local authority, not as a private developer, that we want to really focus on the social benefits as well, as making sure that it stacks up from a financial point of view. There is in the report a list of the sites in scope. I just wanted to point out as well that some of those older ones that were considered under previous regeneration strategies, like Future Places, for example, have now moved forward. So councillors will be aware the Poole Civic Centre went through council late last year with disposal to try and get something moving on that site. We also have Constitution Hill, which I think is a really exciting site, will deliver around 100 social, well, council-owned homes. And also regeneration around things like Poole Old Town, so the museum being brought up to date, the heritage assets which have been restored down there, and also some of the investment around flood defences, transport, infrastructure, such as the bridges, to drive that regeneration in that area. So I think it's really useful because I often hear councillors saying, oh, what happened with that project or that project, which in the past would have come under regeneration. So I wanted just to demonstrate that some of them have moved on quite a lot. The paper then goes into those discussions on the sites that are still very much our priority. I would say there is a lot more detail that we could have provided, but I wanted to make sure we provided what was needed, but then have that invitation to look closer at any of those sites that councillors want to. So please don't think this is every bit of information that we have available on any of these sites. There is a lot for every single one, but I'm hoping that it will potentially kind of give you a bit of an appetite, maybe to focus on specific areas, specific sites, or specific aims of regeneration across those. So it's really to help kind of shape Scrutiny's priorities more than anything. I feel that our regeneration position, we now have really clear ambition, we have that delivery focus, we are looking and working hard on our market intelligence. We've built a really strong relationship with Homes England. We still have real pressures, like external pressures when it comes to regeneration, borrowing costs, inflation, construction. We know the market is a really, really difficult place. So we're trying to work within that to get to a point of delivery, and particularly with partners, because I think that's the best way that we can do it. So I think that's everything I'm going to say on the paper, but very happy to, sorry, my voice is slowly kind of disappearing. I'm hoping it stays for the end of this item, but I do have Amina Matten, Director for Regeneration, with me for more specific questions as well. So very happy. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader. I can see Councillor Trent is waiting to ask a question, so we'll go to you first, Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I fear this may be a controversial subject, and I almost feel the wild dog snapping at my ankles whilst I, am thinking about it. But in the paper last week, there was an article that the government is looking to local authorities as potential partners for providing homes, obviously on a temporary basis, for asylum seekers. And I'm wondering whether there's anything to be explored within that, maybe on some of our more difficult sites where we perhaps need a little extra magnet to Homes England or whoever's going to be sort of running that thing, to see whether we can have a site that would be suitable for such a development, as long as it's on the condition that as soon as it's not required for that purpose, which by its very nature is a temporary purpose, then it would then get transferred to the housing revenue account. It sounds like an idea. I think some local authorities are exploring it, but it sounds like an idea of utilising a dilemma that the government's got and actually trying to get something out of it in the long term for the town. And I'm wondering whether that's been thought about or looked at the moment.
Thank you. And I was listening to LBC, I think, on New Year's Day, and getting very cross at the radio as they were discussing this, because there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of confusing council housing, councils, the Home Office, immigration policy alongside housing policy. Very, very complex area. I think what you're referring to, Councillor Trent, is the Local Authority Housing Fund, and it's round 4, which has just gone forward, open to applications. And I know there are lots of councils across the country who have been applying for that. I was going to, we are also within that mix as far as I know, but I'm not sure exactly how that relates to our housing asylum seekers and so on. It might be something actually that we would want to get Councillor Wilson and perhaps the housing team to talk about a bit more, because it relates to the resettlement schemes around Afghan resettlement and so on. And I did feel a lot of the coverage kind of was very broad brush and assuming the worst, rather than actually looking at how it relates to the whole of the resettlement programme, and how it can best be obtained to deliver affordable council housing. I'm going to ask Amina, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So as the leader has described, we already participate in the programme, the Local Authority Housing Fund, which is on round 4. We've successfully secured grant through rounds 1 to 3. Round 3 is currently underway. We've got 16 homes which we're delivering as part of that programme. That includes 8 new build homes. So you're absolutely right. It is a scheme that supports new build homes. What I would say is that the grant that they give for new build homes is far less than what we need to make those sites come forward. So at the moment, it's been predominantly acquisitions and street properties where we can quickly provide resettlement homes and opportunities for the cohort that government has identified. In terms of new build homes, it's been far more challenging to bring forward new build sites because of the level of subsidy that's needed to make those sites work. But we have got 8 homes under the current programme.
Yep. Thank you. It just struck me when I read that, and I sort of thought, oh yeah, I can see a whole can of worms here. But a handful of sort of bed and breakfasts, HMO type things and so on, because they're looking to replace hotel use. So I've got mixed feelings about whether that's good, bad or indifferent. but it just seemed as if the government is desperate to do that, that there might be a little bit more money on offer to help jumpstart some of these developments, which would ultimately, I hope, end up in the housing revenue account as part of our housing stock. And it's just something that I just think, you know, perhaps we can take advantage of it, but it doesn't sound like it's necessarily going to be what I imagine. As I say, I've only got the scantest detail about it, but I just thought anything that, you know, gets some kind of investment into the areas that we want to get moving helps, I would have thought, even though, you know, it'd be mired in controversy from the word go.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Trent. It's an interesting area to discuss. Do I have any other questions for the leader or for Amina? Councillor Northover.
I just had a quick question about the Boscombe Towns Fund. I've just found that whenever I look on the website, the information is very poor, and I can't even see really who's in charge of it or running it particularly. I can see who's on the board, but you know, really understanding who's calling the shots and also the minutes are rarely updated. I think I just had a quick look now. It's from well over a year ago. I think the last meeting seems to have happened. I don't know if that's right or if it's just not updated, but I think when we're talking about governance earlier, that it needs to be really, really clear how that's being managed and spent.
Thank you for the question. I agree with you. I think this is at the Boscombe website. I agree. Yeah, and I think the two don't work together. So there's lots of information on the Boscombe, Better Boscombe Regeneration website, which is externally managed, and on that we have to provide the minutes within 10 days of each meeting. So what I'll take away is an action to make sure A, that's happening, and B, then that we bring that back into the council website so that the information is updated at the same time. In terms of governance, the council is the accountable body, so we remain the decision taker with regards to how the funding is allocated and the projects. The board, I'm going to Councillor Canvan, but Councillor Canvan is also representative as board councillor on the board, is made up of MP, local ward councillors and community representatives. And it's fair to say, since its first inception, it's changed quite a bit. It was about the Royal Arcade. It's now about delivering much more grassroots-led projects, which the residents and the community representatives and wider members have been supportive of. In terms of governance, government wrote to us in September last year and basically said there's lots of funding pots which were administered under previous governments. We're now going to simplify it into one pot called the Local Regeneration Fund. And that means we don't necessarily need all the governance that's been in place so far. So for instance, every time you make a change to a project, you have to go back to MHCLG and get their permission. Now it's been all localised. So we are properly now as an accountable body able to make decisions at a local level on what we deliver with that funding, albeit the projects have been defined with the strategic towns on board. But I will make sure that the comms on the website is updated and so that it's much more easier to navigate. They should have, I think the Better Boscombe website is more improved than it was a few months ago, but please do let me know if it's still not the case.
Yes, of course.
I don't, unless I'm not seeing it, but I should be able to easily see it. There's not anything. It's what they would like us to know, but it's not who's on the board, who's chairing it, who the minutes, the agenda. I just looked at a most recent agenda. It's like a page. There must be more information than that, I would hope. Yeah.
So it sounds like it's not updated, but yeah, that's helpful feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to, I suppose, come in at this point and say thank you for presenting this to us, and that the way I've sort of taken this report is as a bit of a, as you said when you presented, Leader, a bit of an overview for us to get an idea of some of the outline of what's going on in some of the key projects, but as a jumping off point really for us. And it feels actually quite good timing in some ways for this report, because we are going to be doing our work programming for the whole ONS function. The idea being that we do that up until the May 27 election. So I think this gives us something really useful to start from in terms of what we might want to look at in regeneration over the next slightly less than 18 months now. And where we might, as a board, most usefully focus our attention to try and add value, to try and be that critical friend, have that input that is what we're here to do. So that was just some sort of thoughts from myself. Councillor Beasley, I'm aware you had a lot of questions that came out of reading the report, and I don't know if you wanted to ask some of them here, or if there were any particular ones you wanted to focus on. I wanted to give you an opportunity, so you shared those with us a few days ago.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your response over the weekend. And I apologise if I need to members for it being relatively late, but of course there wasn't very much time over the Christmas New Year period for it to be any sooner. And I thought it was important to share those with members of this board, because if we're not working in harmony across any particular aspect of our work, then what are we here for? And so it's for that reason that I did that. And the report that we have in front of us this evening threw up, I think it was 35 questions. They're not trivial questions. They're really fundamental questions about regeneration. I don't make any secret of the fact that it is a subject I know quite a bit about, so hence the detail of those questions. And they are there because this report tells me that those are unanswered questions. So whilst I accept and understand that this isn't a fully detailed report in front of us this evening, there are some pretty fundamental things in there which are notable by their absence and should be there if this regeneration report is likely to find the outcomes that I hope we're all looking for. In addition to that, and I think I introduced what I wrote to members of the board with this, it's around our scrutiny function as well as a board, because this report highlighted to me that our scrutiny function isn't quite where I think it should be. I think you probably agree with me on that. And coming out of the Leslie Searcy's external assurance review, which came out of the Best Value review over 2 years ago, whilst we might have picked up some of those issues, I think this report highlights that we certainly haven't picked up all of them. And it kind of feels as though we are really sort of, if you like, box ticking rather than going through the scrutiny process to the degree of detail I think we need to. We need to be challenging. That's our function, that's why we're here. And we need to make sure that we get to that point which abuts many of the issues that are there at audit and governance. They don't overlap, but they are complementary to one another. And that's something that we need to be terribly mindful of if we're going to fulfil that function properly in the public interest. So it was around those two main topics if I wrote. I don't need to rehearse them because everybody's had them, unless they are filling a vacancy tonight, of course, in which case that hasn't been circulated. But and I did remark on that in the email itself. Now, for us to go forward with the regeneration issues further from tonight, I think we need to have a clear plan of how we are going to scrutinise, when we're going to scrutinise, and on what basis. Now, in the interim, it may be that those 35 or more questions, they're just mine, maybe plenty of others too, are properly and fully answered, because otherwise we haven't got the foundation on which, to build our scrutiny process. And so I'm in your hands, Chair. You were very clear in your response to me, and I appreciate that it was constructive, it was helpful, and I hope has taken us all to the next stage of what it is that we should be doing.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Yeah, I think, as I said, I feel that a great number of the questions you've shared with us are kind of going to be really helpful in shaping some of the topics that we pick up for our work programming that go into the next let's just say under 18 months for the sake of ease, and can kind of direct really good, focused, useful scrutiny of the specific projects that you know that are referred to in the report, but at that quite high level, and not in full detail, as I think as the leader said, aware that they weren't going into full detail on those things in this particular report. But I think you're right. I certainly am very supportive of the idea that we have a strong focus on some of these key regeneration projects, and we put those forward in our work programming for priorities, which I think for members to remind you, I think our workshop to kind of go through and decide on our priorities is at the beginning of February. So we've got a month or so to put forward our topics, and Councillor Beasley's already sent some on regeneration to me as well, to put forward our topics so that we can have a really useful workshop and put that programme together. So thank you very much for that. I have seen a couple of other hands. So I think I saw Councillor Walters, and then we'll come to Councillor Canavan.
Yeah, when we were focusing on the individual projects here, which projects would you suggest require the most amount of scrutiny right now when it comes to us building up that working plan?
Go ahead, Leader.
That's quite an open-ended question, and to be honest, I think it comes down to what scrutiny want to look at, where they can see there's risk, or where they can see there's something that can be contributed by the scrutiny function. Who knows? It might be all of them, and we spend a lot of time on them, which is absolutely fine as well. The area which I think is moving at the fastest pace, and I say that in the relative sense of it is still not moving, very fast, because I don't believe we have an economy that supports fast-paced regeneration at the moment, anywhere in the country, if not anywhere in the world. However, I would say that now we've got the revised 5-year business plan for BDC. We've also got talks with Homes England on the Winter Garden site. The board are moving forward with concepts, and I think there's a lot there actually, which will probably be the report that we want to bring forward soonest as a cabinet to bring to a decision. Now, I would say it's up to the board whether you would want to do some work on BDC, on Winter Gardens, whatever level you would like to look at sooner, and therefore be able to feed into the cabinet report, or wait for the cabinet report and then scrutinise it that way. I think it's kind of that difference between overview and scrutiny, isn't it? And how best to feed in. But for me, I think the one I can see coming forward soonest is BDC and the Winter Garden site, and hopefully some good news there, exciting news there.
Thank you. Amina, did you want to come in?
From my perspective, I think there's two aspects to this. One is development viability and what's happening in the market and market conditions, and there might be something there in terms of open scrutiny members sort of looking at that in a little bit detail in terms of what's happening in the market, because that essentially sets the whole framework in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And I think there's something, just from my perspective, we're trying to create market confidence. So both confidence in terms of investors and confidence from Homes England, and investors in terms of who might come and see these propositions think, actually, we know this site is challenging, but we also understand better what it needs in order for it to come forward as a developable opportunity. I think I'd just highlight, if we go back to how decisions were made and looking at where or how we got to where we've got to, sometimes that doesn't create the confidence in the market. So from my perspective, I think there's something around what's happening in the market. We talk about in each of the projects about why it's a challenging financial environment. Perhaps we could have a session on that in terms of the borrowing, the revenue costs, the wider challenges in the market that mean these might not be as straightforward as we all expect them to be. But then on a wide point around the projects, I'd just like to echo, my role is to make these investable and make them attractive to the market, and then give people some real clear positions to come and work with us in.
Okay, thank you very much, Amina. I think it was Councillor Canavan next.
Thank you, Chair. The only recommendation in this paper is to lobby the government to support the council with a funded programme for infrastructure, affordable housing and economic growth to unlock complex assets. But I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that plan is. And I suspect neither will the government. So the chances of success to seek money for an undefined programme of building will not work. In paragraph 8 of this report, it talks about the BCP growth plan, which is due to be adopted in 2026. Now, for me, that's the area of scrutiny that we need to focus on. I'm not especially interested in looking at individual sites because I think that misses the point. I think we could get really bogged down with looking at individual sites where, in fact, what we should be focusing on is what our plan is to build and to develop BCP across the conurbation. So I'd like to see some work for scrutiny in looking at what that growth plan is and what it's going to be, what the objectives of it are, how it's going to be delivered, what the timescales are behind it. And looking at some, definable objectives as to what we can actually achieve through that programme. I think that's the area of work that I would like to see us do, rather than focusing on any particular specific problem. For me, I struggle to understand what is the BCP's regeneration strategy. That's not clear to me. I might be being dim, but I don't know what it is. I'd be more confident if I knew what it was. And if the BCP growth plan is going to encapsulate all of that, then that's, I think, what we should be looking at. So that's just my view about how we take that forward. And I'd personally like to see something along those lines built in to the recommendations to Cabinet, because just asking the government for more money in the current climate without a very, very clear plan isn't going to work, in my view.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. And I think, if I may, just before you come in, I had a sort of related question, which was really about, as Councillor Canavan has said, and I think Councillor Beasley also in his email, I'm not completely clear about whether we have currently a regeneration strategy, whether there is a plan to put one in place with that title or something like it, how kind of, and what that's actually going to look like. Will that be a sort of one document kind of setting out over a particular time frame, or are there more parts to it? And I don't know if you could just, whilst answering Councillor Canavan, maybe just bring that in as well and tell us a bit more about that side of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I think the first thing to say is I would really welcome scrutiny on the BCP growth plan. The growth plan effectively replaces previous growth plans, which have been done with Dorset, in conjunction with Dorset, by the LEP. So this will be the first growth plan ever on the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole footprint, and I think that's really exciting. Also, how it links into devolution as well. So that would be something I would encourage scrutiny on. I think you could look at it. You can look at the growth plan through a million lenses: regen, skills, health, whatever it is. So it might be worth kind of thinking about certain areas. It is currently being drafted. We will have we're hoping that it will come through the democratic process in the summer, in early summer, just before the summer holidays. Yeah, however you want to take that one forward. Just in terms of the strategy, so we've had a couple of regeneration papers that have come through. I think it's really important that we look at it in the context of what was before, which was a lot of money going into regeneration, into future places specifically, with not much output and a very broad portfolio of sites. And that, unfortunately, got us, I think, a little bit caught up in being able to actually deliver anything, but also it meant that we were sinking a lot of money into plans, strategies, visions, all sorts, that then had relatively little value when it actually came to being able to attract investment, whether that was from government, from the private sector. So our strategy is focused on those individual sites, but it's also including, so in this paper we've got things like the core principles and the measures of success, which are, you know, it was something we've always worked to, but we wanted to put them into words and put them into something that's actually tangible and can be scrutinised. So there is that bit more information, I think, here about what we want to achieve. But the strategy overall is around that partnership working. We are not we're not looking at regeneration projects anymore, and I don't know if councils ever really have, as something that we bring forward on our own as a council. The only way forward is that partnership model now, within the context of how national government is doing its funding, within the context of devolution. So our strategy is both informed by the market, but also informed by what's come before. I mean, maybe that's something that I'm really hesitant to say we need to create a strategy with words and pictures and everything else, because actually for me it's about what the actions are and what sits behind that, and I think that is covered in this report. But if there would be some value in potentially doing something a bit more tangible, like something you can hold that says this is the regeneration strategy. And I was also reflecting on this. I have to be a bit careful because I have both the portfolio for regeneration and planning, which is very tricky when it comes to some sites which are kind of close to the planning process, but also are within the regeneration portfolio. But I have been reflecting quite a bit on how we need to go out to local developers, to local private sector, national and international. Like we've done, Amina and I have been to like UK Reef, we've chatted to developers, we've learned a lot more about what they're looking for, we've built those relationships, we're working with Homes England. But I think there's also something around how we communicate to our local residents, our own residents, of what regeneration will look like, what it should look like. Because at the moment, I don't think there's something that kind of brings that into one single form, because of the volatility within the market and the difficulty of delivery. The last thing we want to do is overpromise, when actually we have to be led by the risks, we have to be led by the context, we have to be led by what we can achieve, rather than just trying to present something that looks really nice but doesn't actually have any strength behind it or viability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Rice, I had next.
Something that I would be interested in scrutinising would be the density of building on the sites. And contrasting, being able to have a workshop with experts in urban design and urban planning, and contrasting sort of, for example, 3 different scenarios for a site. One with much higher density, but, for example, could build affordable housing, and how it would need to be designed in order to get that higher density and affordable housing. Because when I sit on planning committee and we have things coming through to planning committee, it is always all of the councillors on the committee, it seems, are wanting social housing to be built, and there's always the excuse that it can't be, but there's often a lot of land that is not used particularly efficiently in the planning application. So that's what I would like to scrutinise, and check that we're being as ambitious as we could be, and not holding back on sort of concerns that councillors will never approve it, or something like that, because of the sort of the implications of what we would need to do in terms of having a higher density. And then the other thing that I see is on the work plan as a separate topic is the social value aspect, which is mentioned in the Dolphin Centre site, particularly in terms of the health benefits of, well, all sorts of social benefits of having a leisure centre. But we're not able to include those in our calculations. Like, I think it's a very difficult topic to be able to financially include it, but it's also something that I'm interested in, and I don't know whether any other councils are managing to achieve it or not. And the last thing that you said, Councillor Earl, was about what the public can envisage happening, like in terms of regen, and that that does seem like quite a good idea, to be able to do some sort of exercise whereby we're envisaging what we would like to see in the next 20 years in our area, in order to then be able to give confidence to developers from that aspect as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Leader.
I think those are three really good points. And the first one I just wanted to touch on was that density and build and design, where I've been obviously in both my role in planning and regeneration, working, speaking to developers in our Agents and Developers Forum and so on. It's become really clear that legislation changes recently, particularly around things like the Building Safety Act, as a result of Grenfell and so on, and some of the tragedies that have happened in very dense building environments. We now have incredibly strict rules that are which really prioritise the safety of the inhabitants, which I think is absolutely right, but make it very, very difficult to find viability within that when it comes to build. So, for example, an additional staircase, different ways of access, height restrictions, being able to pump water through buildings and things like that. And I think that's really interesting, and I found it quite interesting learning more about those constraints when it comes to legislation. So I don't know, there's a lot of buildings that are out there which look fantastic from an architecture point of view, but I don't think the future looks like that. I think that actually the future of the built environment is going to be actually square, actually a little bit more boring because of being able to get fire escapes and so on throughout buildings, and being able to build within those scopes. So it's quite interesting to me that I think that will change the future of development in the UK. I think it will affect density. The height restrictions are really, really difficult when it comes to viability as well. And I think there are two things. The way we look at it is there are things that can shift. We either, change the law on safety, building safety, or the market will go up and down, investment will come up and down, borrowing will go up and down, and so on. And we may at some point strike a balance between those. But at the moment, it is really challenging for developers, and I hear that on a very regular basis from them. We shouldn't be put off by that. I think it's really important that we do build to safe standards. Everyone should have security that where they live is safe. And so we don't want to shy away. But what it does do is really change the look and feel. It changes how regeneration is done. I think it's going to have lasting impact on the market. Your other point on social value, I think that we do have, as an administration, we've been very clear, the financial sustainability of this council is the absolute most important thing, because otherwise we don't have a council, we lose all of our non-statutory services, and we face effectively a Section 114, which we want to avoid. When it comes to social value, that can play a part within that, and we do have the ability to look at the social benefits, look at delivering social housing on site and so on as a council, but we do still need to make the finances stack up, and that's why I think the partnership side is so important, because if it can't be stacked up through the private sector and through local government borrowing, the only other way you can plug the gaps is through bringing in central government funding, whether that is through Homes England or one of our grant schemes, to be able to deliver. And then your final point, Councillor Rice, was
The community sort of envisaging.
Oh yes, yeah, I like that idea. I think it's something we've talked about as well, Amina and I, and also in the context of the local plan as well, because that's going to be, we all know the timeline for that. When that comes forward, we want to be able to demonstrate what it might look like from a regeneration perspective, and not miss the regeneration opportunities that actually a local plan will be able to give to us, and particularly in the development of that local plan as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, I've got a few things that I just really wanted to raise as things that now I've had a thought about it. I think that maybe there things for the growth plan or for any strategy that you are writing that maybe I'd like to see either emphasized or to make sure they're very much included? The first one is affordable housing. I'd like to see quite a lot of a bit more detail about affordable housing, what we mean by it, and how we are going to include that in our plan. And particularly in terms of, because in the past there have been such problems with things like where people have got affordable flats where they bought half of it and rented half of it, and then they've ended up with all of the maintenance costs. And so affordable housing hasn't always worked out for the people who've got it in the way that it was meant to. And just looking into making sure that if we are doing affordable housing, we're doing it in a way that will really work well for the people that are going to live in it. Related to that, I think it's really important that we think about the mix of the types of housing that we're building when we're doing the regeneration, and making sure that that mix relates to the type of housing that local people need. So our young people need places to live. Also, the families need places to live. So we can't just have all 1-bedroom flats in the centre of town, because sometimes whole families will want to live in the centre of town. And the issue of mix can be quite difficult. I know we've got it comes into planning as well, but if we look at it with regeneration, we can perhaps try and influence it before it even gets to the planning stage. But the third thing I think is actually something even more controversial than Councillor Trent was bringing up earlier, and that is, having looked at some of the questions that Councillor Beasley had, some very good questions about things that have gone wrong with some of our developments, particularly to do with the contract side of things. That, yeah, questions like, why did we have this in the contract? Why didn't we have a clause that said that in the contract? And those are really good questions, but they're in the past now. But we need to make sure we don't make those same mistakes in the future. And so here comes the controversial bit. I think what we actually need, somebody needs to be able to scrutinise the detail of what's happening when we're actually making the deals. And that means scrutinising information that is not open to the public. And I know that that is a difficult thing in this council, and I know that we are not very good at scrutinising it, because it's we get to this problem: do we release the information? If we do, is it going to leak? And so I really think this is something that we have to tackle this, and we have to decide what our strategy is on how we handle it. Because if decisions are made by just maybe one cabinet member and one officer, it's so easy for a mistake to be made. So this is, we really need, when the contract is happening, people who, I mean, we're not all experts. I know Councillor Beasley has got a background in development and knows all about it. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but at least if I have a chance to start looking through these things, I can start to build some expertise in it. So I do think it is important that we think about how we are going to make sure the quality of the contracts that we make with the partners that we have, to make sure that we are not making those mistakes that actually can end up costing us an awful lot of money.
Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Leader, would you like to come back on any of those points?
I'm not sure exactly what is being referred to, but if I could get a bit more information around it, that might be quite helpful, just to understand in a bit more detail. What I would just add to that, though, is just some assurance that as a cabinet, we obviously are in alliance, in the Three Towns Alliance. We don't do individual cabinet decision making. We have collective decision making. What we sometimes do is decision making where it's a cabinet decision for the portfolio holder to work in, or in consultation with the portfolio holder, the director of finance will make a decision. But it's really important when operating an alliance that we don't have cabinet members running off and signing contracts on their own. So I just wanted to give some assurance that that doesn't happen within this administration. However, if there is stuff to be learnt from the past, whether that is scrutinised here in overview and scrutiny or in audit and governance, I think it's really important that we do learn from the mistakes, and also identify where some of those challenges have come from before. What I don't want to do, though, is get into the realms of, well, we need an external audit, which is going to cost X hundreds of thousands of pounds, when actually, if it is about looking forward, we've got to take it in that vein, use our own internal audit, be able to actually scrutinise in a transparent way, and be able to move forward rather than it becoming a political blame game.
Okay. Thank you. Did I have anybody else anyone who hasn't asked a question? Oh, sorry, I just saw Amina raise her hand, Councillor Goodall, and then I'll come to you. Amina, did you
Apologies,
want
I was
to
just going to
come
say,
in?
in terms of the current work plan for audit and governance, there is a report coming forward for Carter's Key, which does address some of the contractual concerns which were raised, I think again raised by Councillor Beeser's committee members. So that's also about taking some of those learnings in terms of how did we enter into that deal, are there any particular issues that we should remedy, and or the governance process which resulted in that decision being taken. And that will deal with some of the contractual matters, which again, I can give the assurance that that's something we're already embedding from a regeneration point of view in terms of having really clear heads of terms and memorandum of understanding between parties.
Thank you, Amina. And if I can just chip in to say that just recently, myself and Councillor Connolly have attended some training on the working together of the audit and governance and overview and scrutiny, financial overview and scrutiny function in particular, which was really helpful for, I think, for both of us. And we've had some conversations around some of the specific bits of work. You won't be surprised to hear that Carter's Key came up when we were talking about that. So that's something that I'm engaged with Councillor Connolly on, how we can make sure that we're working together on being really effective on scrutinising that as well. Councillor Goodall, you raised your hand.
I just wanted to ask a question about the relationship of the regeneration with the town councils that are coming along, and whether we would be regarding town councils as developers, whether there will be a special relationship between town councils and BCP as a council. And the other thing I wanted to pick up on, while I quite understand Councillor Canavan's comment concerning strategy as opposed to individual projects, I did just wonder whether there are individual projects that are competing with each other, and therefore if two projects come along at the same time, whether there would have to be of necessity a choice to be made. Thank you.
Leader.
So just to clarify, there are no special relationships in this regeneration function. I think that's really important to say. When it comes to town councils, which we obviously already have within Christchurch and the parish councils as well, and we're establishing in Poole and Bournemouth, I think it's really important as a council, as BCP council, we understand that they are democratically elected and that they should have a say, like any consultee, whether that is a individual or a resident or a business. They should still have a way of feeding into the process. I actually have a list of things I'm going to send to Councillor Salmon as requests for scrutiny, and on there I've actually got the relationship between BCP Council and its current relationship with town and parish councils, but also how we can best learn from the work that's been done across Dorset, the work that's already been done in working with those, to make sure that we're laying the ground in the best way for Bournemouth and Poole and Broadstone councils to establish themselves. So I think that that's a really interesting area of scrutiny. I would encourage that to come forward. But when it comes to regeneration, we still, as the principal upper tier authority, we hold the responsibility for place and the built environment. However, town and parish councils have been doing some really incredible things in some areas where they have been supplementing that. So an area I always think about is, for example, Salisbury. They have a really, really well-established town council, which has been delivered all sorts of things around regeneration, all the things that we see anyway, which I talk about all the time, like events and youth services and so on. There are some town councils out there that are real placemakers, and I think regeneration is not just the built environment. Regeneration is about use, culture, how we interact with the places that we are in, the things that we use them for, whether that is for social, for work, how we move around as well. Like, it's a really broad term. And so I think the new town councils will have a really important role to play in that. But it's got to be up to those town councils how much they want to as well. If they don't want anything to do with regeneration, that's fine. If they want to be part of that placemaking, then they'd be very welcome to.
Amina.
It's a really good question in terms of the prioritisation and competing priorities. I think one of our bigger challenges is, coming back to the growth plan, is the sites are fragmented at the moment. They are in different locations. When you think about regeneration of Southampton, it's one place. They're talking about the town centre. If you talk about, other places, regeneration tends to be in a discrete location where it's really easy to look at that place making benefits. So what we intend to do with the growth plan is to bring together those sites which are in the different towns and really share that overall story in terms of what does it mean, but what does it mean in terms of investment, whether it's us or a third party. And why that's important is the growth plan is almost like a menu of investment opportunities. So we can't do it all, but actually here's a site that if we were to invest, say, 20 million, that 20 million will give you, for every £1 you invest, £3 in the local area. So that's the objective of the growth plan. It's essentially saying, here's different sites, different opportunities, whether it's leisure, whether it's residential, whether it's town centre, whether it's transport, and it will then go to different funders and different investing partners. So in a way, our investment opportunities become prioritised by where the investment is coming from. And at the moment, our challenge is we don't have enough capacity to borrow the amount of money needed to bring those sites together as one big plan. But as the paper alludes to, if we did have one investor or lots of investors, we've got the capacity to deliver around 5,000 homes. That's improving town centre, footfall into town centre. That's improving our transport, because the more that you put into infrastructure now, then that unlocks opportunities with Network Rail and different partners. So our competing priorities, I would say that they're less competing in the sense of we at the moment aren't making a decision about where we put the investment. I think it gives a really good story to an investment partner, whether it is private or Homes England, to say, actually, if we were to put some funding into here, that will unlock 500 homes and that will unlock the town centre. And those are the sort of conversations we're having at the moment, Homes England. So we've basically given them the regeneration programme as per this report and said, here's Winter Gardens, here's Cotlands, here's some of the other sites that we've got, and here's Hulls Bay, alongside the 30 odd sites that we've got for housing delivery. And essentially, we've been working through a prioritisation with Homes England. So I mentioned Hawkwood Road. That was a scheme that we've got 10 million pounds in grant from Homes England, which we didn't have at the start of a year ago. So that's what we do. We take all of these sites which make up that 5,000 homes. We look at what we can afford to deliver and what can we invest in, and then we go to different partners and say, what is of interest or what's an attractive opportunity for you, and their return will be, is there a return on my investment? How quickly can this site come forward? And in order for that site to come forward, we've got to create the right conditions as the council, planning or decisions around what we want on those sites. And then thirdly, if it's not for them, is there another way that we could deliver this for different partners? So it's that competing priorities, but having a really clear strategy about where they could invest in that.
Thank you very much, Amina. Thank you. Okay, I think I've come to the end of the speakers app. Councillor Beasley, feel free.
Well, thank you, Chair. I wanted to sort of hear what members wanted to contribute to the paper, and I wonder where specifically you see us going from here, in the sense that, like, picking up actually the points made by Councillor Canavan, the issue around the strategic approach inevitably is going to come back also, if you like, at the next phase, to a number of site specifics, not least because of the amount of sunk cost that we've got in some of them. We can't just let them go and follow the market whenever it happens to be. We need to be in control of that. And I'm talking about tens of millions when they're put together, that's already there in terms of sunk cost. And so that is actually quite an important part to follow on from that strategic approach. I'm not quite sure what the timetable for this is envisaged to be, because without it being scrutiny and not just pre-cabinet scrutiny, and that was one of the things that coming out of that best value review around overview and scrutiny that was held to be an important part of it. Without that, we need to be doing quite a lot of work beforehand, and then we need to be making sure that we've got it in our work programme to be able to do that. And I do have some concerns that this could then be some way over the horizon before we actually are doing that work. Whereas in fact, it sounds to me as though the officers and cabinet may be trying to move forward more quickly on one or two of them, but possibly site specific rather than strategic. So I think what I'm trying to tell you from my point of view is that I think we should be programming that in, definitely.
Yep.
And we ought to be making sure that we understand that we're going to have to give some time to do that. It won't be a question of just doing it quickly at an ONS board meeting. It takes a lot more, I believe, than that. And then that leaves me with, this paper still exists, it's still here, whether it's a pre-cabinet paper or not. And for me, it throws up a number of questions. The ones that I put it forward to be at 35, but actually, judging by what some of those answers might be, it could well throw up a number of others in order to allow us to undertake that scrutiny process properly on behalf of the residents and on behalf of the council. So for me, my dilemma, and perhaps a dilemma for a number of other people, is how are we actually planning to do that?
Yeah.
I don't want to just leave this item here, move on to next business, and actually we don't look at it again until it's next up in the work programme.
Well, understood. I actually wanted to raise something on the timescales on some of these things. I think the report, my reading of the report, is that most of the projects there is an indication of when we might expect the next thing to come forward. I looked through it for that and found, dates in there for the next financial year or for spring 26 or, but I think the one that I don't think I have any sense of timescales on in terms of the next steps is the Carter's Quay. I do see in paragraph 20 that, we're waiting on the administrators. And I appreciate that may mean we don't have any kind of sense of timescales, but I did want to ask about that. I think the way I see this, Councillor Beasley, is that this, and I think I've already said this, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. This report gives us a starting point, a helpful starting point for planning further work on scrutinising regeneration, as do the questions that you've put forward that have come out of this report for you. We have our work programming underway, and their workshop for that in about 4 weeks' time, 5 weeks' time maybe. And I think you're right, we don't want to wait around, but we have to go through a process of looking at the overall work programme and making sure that we balance off other parts. There will be other things beyond regeneration that the board needs to look at inevitably. So we do have to go through that process of balancing off. But I agree, I don't want us to sit around, I don't want us to go, okay, we've done that, and then not think about it again until 6 months' time at all. So I completely agree. But I think the place to kind of thrash out our next steps after this report is probably our our workshop at the beginning of February. I hope that is helpful.
Councillor Cannon's first, but
Yeah.
I've got another question.
Okay, thank you. Just if I can just circle back to that question about timescales on, you know, where we might see the next significant step forward on Carter's Quay. That might be, if you can say anything that's not in the report, then.
I think this is one of the reasons why regeneration is always a challenge, and a good, you know, positive challenge in some senses, because it does involve different stakeholders, partnership working, investors, government, MPs even, you know, it involves everyone to get projects off the ground. But that's because in this case, in Carter's Quay, we are still waiting on the administrator to make a decision on the assets, and it's very frustrating because we've got this site sitting there, and like Councillor Beasley said, you know, there's some cost in a lot of regeneration sites, which we have a grip of the finances, but we can't actually, we're almost like in limbo. We're not able to actually do anything about them without other actors in this making a decision. I don't want to put a time on it, but I don't think the administrator would appreciate me doing that. But I will just see if, Amina, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. So the cabinet report which we're looking to bring forward is in regards to how the site might come forward in terms of the development if and once we acquire the land. In terms of the ability to acquire land, that we have made an offer which should be below the threshold for cabinet, which again reflects what we think the value is of the land. In April, Homes England is releasing their new programme, which will have a new prospectus, and for that we will have to demonstrate that we've got a pipeline of around 900 homes. So our priority is to build up a pipeline of opportunities, and that will include Carter's Quay, to put forward to Homes England. So realistically, the scheme will only be viable if we have some type of grant from Homes England. So their programme doesn't launch until April, so it'll be sometime after that when we have an indication of what capacity they have to support some of these schemes.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come back and follow up on a point Councillor Beasley made, really, and going to put the leader on the spot and ask in relation to her comment that she estimates the growth plan will be coming in the summer, whether or not it would be possible for this committee to see a draft earlier than now. So my question really is, how early could we see it? I'll give you a bit of time to think about that. The other thing I just wanted to mention, Chair, is I think it's, well, I was going to say dangerous, but I think it would be concerning for me to leave this paper and not do anything more with it and simply wait until we have that February, discussion about the work plan. I absolutely get why you say that, but I think not doing anything with it and simply missing an opportunity to do something with it before February, I think would be dangerous. My view is that there is a bit of scrutiny in here to do around the growth plan, and it's quite a big bit of work in my view if we're going to do it properly. And Councillor Beasley is absolutely right. It will throw up consideration of a variety of different sites, within that overall strategy. But that's what I think we should be looking at. But in order to do all of that work, it does need a bit of scoping. Otherwise, I think we might be kind of just scrabbling in the dark a bit. So I'd like to see if it was possible for us to do a bit of scoping so that by the time we get to the meeting in February, we know what it is that we're thinking about doing, so that amongst all of the other things, the leader said she's got a list, I've got a list as well. So amongst all of those competing issues that we're going to be looking at, that we've actually got something to look at as saying, well, this is a bit of work. How do we see that bit of work in comparison to these other bits of work? Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely, and I'm completely in agreement with you that we don't want to just we don't want to just leave this and say come back to it whenever there's the next cabinet decision. We don't want to leave this and just come back to it in 5 weeks either. We as a committee, myself as the chair, Sue as vice, we all need to be thinking about that workshop in 5 weeks time and being ready for it and having done some work, so some scoping on our topics, because I think that'll help us make decisions. If we, just a line on a piece of paper doesn't get us very far. So completely agree with you. Is there a specific recommendation or a form of words you want to put forward for us to kind of make a decision on? Are we going to have the leader come back in first?
Yeah. So just to clarify on the kind of governance around the growth plan, we have set up a BCP growth board, which is made up of sector representatives, business people who are looking at how we deliver this plan. They're the ones who will be their job, essentially, amongst other things, is to deliver this plan. However, it does obviously come through the council for us to adopt through our democratic processes. But when we get the first draft, what I'll do is I will ask the chair of the growth board how we can involve councillors in that process, whether that is sharing it with councillors to be able to give some feedback, whether that is through scrutiny. But I think that's a request that I'm very happy with, and very happy to raise with the board to ensure that they are. And it's quite good timing because I think we have a board meeting next week. Yeah, on Tuesday next week. So I'm very happy to take that one away. It is, I can't stress how important the growth plan is. It's really, really important document, not just for the short term, but for scoping out devolution, possibly the next 20 years of development, growth, skills, all sorts across our town, governance in particular. So it does need to be given the time and attention that it deserves. At this point, though, it's in the drafting stage. It's quite early days. But once we have a draft, I'd be happy to share that, as long as the committee, the board, are also willing to do that.
Great, thank you.
So,
Councillor Canavan.
yeah, so just in terms of your question about how we might formulate some kind of recommendation from all of this, I'm just wondering whether what we could do is just to agree that between now and the meeting that you've referred to in February, that collectively as a committee we try and do some scoping work to come up with key lines of inquiry, perhaps, as a way of enabling us to put something on paper about what it is we want to scrutinise, and then that can come into the mix of everything else that we're considering. Yep. That's very clumsy worded, so apologies for that.
No, that's great, and I think I understand that. We can't make a working group because we can't use the Office of Resource quite like that, but we could perhaps take a handful of volunteers who would agree to go away and work on that scoping between now and that February work planning session. And I'm wondering if you might be putting your hand up for that, Councillor Cameron, and Councillor Beasley. Would that be something that you'd be willing to be part of as well? And would anybody else? Thank you. Would anybody else like to be involved in that bit of scoping work so that we've got something quite sort of thought out to bring forward for work programming? Well, I'm happy to join you. And that makes 3. Okay. All right. Let's do I have consensus of the board that that's a good way to proceed on that? I don't think we need to vote, but yeah, lovely. Thank you. Well, that seems like a useful outcome, I think. We do have a recommendation on this report as well, and I don't know if it's worth just thinking about whether we want to formally make that recommendation. So we've got Councillor Canavan has expressed some reservations about it already.
I'm not unhappy with the recommendation. For me, it's all about timing. And if the leader was going to do it next week, I might be a bit prickly about it. But in the course of time, if the leader was minded to do that, then I think that's fine.
Can I make a suggestion?
Councillor Aikenhead.
I was going to ask a question, but I think that you've already answered it because I was wondering about the timescales for the this 10-year plan. 10 years, very important if it's going to last for that long. You've answered my questions on that. Also, I was going to ask if we can see the first draft. Well, you've answered that already. Excellent. But I wonder if maybe instead of us saying this recommendation is saying that we lobby the government with a funded program, I'm kind of thinking that this program we're going to lobby with is probably going to be this 10-year plan. So maybe we should just call it what it is and say that what we're recommending is that the first draft of the growth plan is shared with board members, with councillors even, so that we can decide how we're going to scrutinise it, and also that the scrutiny of this growth plan is scrutiny is built into the process of, rather than it just being an afterthought, and then this lobbying the government will come afterwards, won't it? You could say to enable the council to lobby the government, and all of what it says here, we the board overview and scrutiny board recommend that the first draft of the growth plan is shared with us, and that scrutiny is built into the process of agreeing it.
Okay, that
Does
sounds.
that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Do we have a seconder for that? I'm happy to second that. So sounds like a sensible recommendation to put forward, given the discussion that we've had. So did you get that, Claire? Great. Is everyone clear on what's being put forward? Then did anyone want to say anything? May we have a show of hands then, all those in favour of that recommendation going forward to Cabinet? That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Lovely. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you very much to the leader. Thank you to Amina for all your time. And thank you everyone for really good, broad-ranging discussion of this big topic. And I think a clear way forward on our how as a board we'll keep an eye on regeneration in a productive way. So thanks a lot. That's brilliant. I'm going to suggest we do take a 5-minute comfort break before we come back and do the rest of the agenda, just because that's where we've got to, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody. Welcome back to the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting this evening. We're moving on now to item 9 on the agenda, which is an update on the topic of parking around schools, which has been approached so far through the rapporteur style of scrutiny. Initially, that rapporteur was Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law, who brought this topic to us initially. However, Councillor Chapman-Law has now handed that role on to Councillor Macro. I understand that most of the work that's been done so far has been done by Councillor Chapman-Law, but that Councillor Macro is going to present it to us as a sort of verbal update now, and for us to talk about how we might want to take this piece of work forward at our February, I think that's right, our February, late February scrutiny meeting. So I'm going to hand over, if I may, to Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Claire for collaborating all the information. Bear with me because I am going to read it, but I have written some notes myself as well. So board members have received the briefing notes earlier, and I'll run through these notes for the benefit of members of the public, because although it's been sent to us, obviously public will not know what's been said. And it's literally to remind all that children are front and centre here in BCP. So the briefing notes for school parking enforcement for children and parents, carers, so that they can feel safer and to encourage others to participate in the suggestions that have been put forward, which I'll explain later. So challenges. Parking issues at nearly all schools during drop-off and pick-up times. More than 100 schools make daily enforcement impractical. Legal limitations allow brief stopping on double yellow lines and no waiting / loading zones for drop-off pick-up. Behaviour improves only when community enforcement officers are present, reverts immediately back to previous behaviour after they leave. There is when they're not there. There is a safety risk when parents rush back to cars upon CEO arrival. So that's the community enforcement officers. And that's really unacceptable parking. So the current enforcement approach, CCTV enforcement at 3 schools, foot patrols at other priority schools. There's 54 CEOs across BCP and 12 to 18 available daily for early, late shifts. That's morning, afternoon. Visiting 6 to 9 schools per day. CEOs arrive 10 to 20 minutes before the school ends and stay until vehicles leave. Abuse of CEOs is logged via body cams and incident reports, but data is not broken down by school. Alternative and long-term measures. School streets. Benefits. Reduce danger, noise and pollution at school gates, encourages active travel. Challenges may slightly increase issues on surrounding roads, but overall benefits outweigh the negatives. And proven success, reduction in children being driven to school where implemented, camera enforcement, and as it says, there's 3 cameras at 3 schools that have cameras. Camera enforcement currently in place in 3 schools. The school keep clear zigzags. Plans to expand as part of the parking framework, but funding is a challenge. Exploring mobile camera systems with dummy casings to deter violations without full installation costs. And then we go on to education and behaviour change. Partnership with Walk Wheels Cycle, which is a former Sustrans, to educate children, staff and families about air pollutions and benefits of active travel. Intensive engagement at more than 20 schools per year leads to measurable increase in walking, cycling and reduction in car use. But if you consider that there are 100 schools, so 20 per year, there's quite a rotation. School travel plans. Schools supported to create plans promoting sustainable travel through incentives, facilities and rules. And I have a copy of the school travel plan and it is really good reading. And I think many schools could use that as a unique selling point as it comes to school choice. Links to safer routes to school group for infrastructure improvements, crossing signage, drop curbs. Parents parking promise. Voluntary pledge for parents to park legally and safely. Impact difficult to measure, but promotes awareness and responsibility. And it is a collective responsibility. I will add that because I'm a driver too. So, Park and Stride encourages parents to park in designated areas away from school and walk the last stretch. Benefits reduce congestion at gates and adds physical activity for children. Collaboration and leadership. Success depends on proactive head teachers and counsellors. Example, St Michael's School, and Councillor Beasley mentioned that in a previous ONS meeting. Strong leadership supporting school streets and active travel. Folkestone Primary embraces behaviour change initiatives and stands firm against complaints. Other schools, Highcliffe, Twynham, Bourne Academy, have implemented new crossings, parking restrictions. And I'm going to add Livingstone Road, which is written here, but it's in my ward, and school streets, which was very much needed and very welcomed by the school community. And if you have a chance of nipping down there and having a look, it can I use the old adage, it's fab. Constraints and governance. Funding limits, expansions of camera enforcement, cost versus revenue challenge. Highway interventions require BCP network management and TRO approval, which is traffic arrangement order. Travel planning officer coordinates between schools and council teams. So I'm going to say here, celebrate the good. So we've got the bikeability, the walk, wheel, cycle trust, park and stride, school streets. The not so good bit, obviously, it's the cost, volunteers for school streets, and whether it's the road suitability. Also, there is another primary school in my ward, which, unlike Livingstone, is very congested because of the nature of the road layout. So, but if we can have it in one, I would like to see it happen, and I'm sure my fellow ward councillor will totally agree with that. Cameras are expensive, and obviously, like it is, whether the revenue would be, but it is the fundamentals of people parking where they shouldn't. So, with parents and carers disregarding, having the disregard for their parking choices, and I'm going to give a big shout out to Christchurch Bike Bus Friday mornings. Group pick up along the school route, so one will start, two will start, and then in the end you get a en masse of cycles into the school grounds. So I'm going to end on that on a very positive note there, and if you have questions, please ask, and I will try my best to answer, and if not, I will get back to you with what you say.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. It's really helpful to just hear, sort of what's been covered so far in the work that Councillor Chapman-Law and yourself have been doing. I think what we're trying to do with this item just tonight is just to decide how we want to approach this when it comes back as a full item, which the plan for that is late February scrutiny. So not the next board meeting, which is our budget scrutiny, but the one after that. We've talked a bit with Councillor Chapman-Law about potentially bringing in representatives from some of the schools, for example, as well as people, officers from parking enforcement, and potentially others, to kind of to talk about the topic and get a broad view. But I think we need to be, and I think it might be worth reminding ourselves of what the original purpose of this was, which was the recognition that there is a daily issue with bad parking and quite frequently dangerous parking outside many schools across BCP, which we're all aware of. The schools are, anyone who has a school in their ward, and I would imagine that is most of us, is aware of this as an issue. And it was about looking at what is being done, what maybe isn't being done, what could be done differently, and any recommendations that we can put forward as a result of picking up that piece of work, to try and change and improve the situation. So that was the purpose, and it's just about how best we go about achieving that in our full session on this, and the sort of culmination of this piece of work. So if anybody has any thoughts, then I'd be really grateful to hear them. I saw Councillor Trent first, and then I'll come over to this side. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. I'm actually wondering whether parent governors or some people from amongst the parent governor cohort could be invited along to sort of look at this, because I'm assuming that it still works the same as it used to, and they're elected by fellow parents at the school, and so obviously have quite a strong link to the parents at the school. And actually representatives from people who live adjacent to schools, because it has an effect obviously on the parents using the schools. It also has an effect on the people living in the area around the school. And I know from past casework that the things aren't always completely compatible, and that you end up having to negotiate between the different factions in the case, because parents obviously want to be able to residents obviously want to be able to access their drive, get out and get to work and things like that, and that it's a regular thing that people are blocking drives and things like that. So I think we need to look at it from all sorts of different sides. I am interested in as much as I've learned today that there's a camera at St Michael's School. I saw that working really well, and one thought I had was that maybe a lot of the people there live within very close walking distance of the school, and I thought, well, maybe that's what's making a difference, because I didn't see much abuse going around the actual zebra crossing and stuff like that. But they had one advantage that most schools don't have, and that's that almost adjacent to the site where they cross, there is a public car park with lots of spaces. And I gather that there's some kind of permit scheme that goes on that enables parents to park their car if they live further away, and sort of in the car park. And obviously that isn't available to most schools. But so although it seems to be a good example of something that's working, there are reasons that might be contributing towards it, including the fact that there appears to be a camera installed looking at the zigzags. So I'm interested in it being as broad as possible, because the problem is, if you just look at it from one angle, then you've always got the people saying, well, they would say that, wouldn't they, sort of thing. Whereas if you can get input from other groups within the school community, parents and the people who actually live around the schools, it just gives you a much better balanced picture. So that's my thoughts anyway. That
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I think that's helpful. I think one of the challenges is going to be, if we're inviting, whether it be parent governors or people who live near schools, how exactly we go about doing that. I mean, with the governors, that might be a bit simpler. We could presumably there'd be a list of all the schools' email addresses somewhere that we could send something out to be cascaded out to governors, and ask if anyone would like to come and have a sort of people come forward if they're interested in taking part. People who live near schools might be more challenging. Not sure how we would invite those people in, but we can have a think about it. And I think your point about the very site-specific nature is quite important one, actually, because each school will have its own set of conditions which impact on parking behaviour, and some will have an easier time of it than others, inevitably, because they're all in different settings with different contexts. So that's something to bear in mind as well. That we want to try and keep this. I think we don't want to go into too much detail on any particular one site. That wouldn't be appropriate. So we need to keep this to kind of what the broad view of what we can do about the issue in general, as much as possible. Councillor Nonofo.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say that this is also an issue for nursery schools, and I have been contacted by a nursery in our area, and they were very concerned because the children are little that are getting out of the cars, and they have no street, traffic awareness whatsoever. And the manager of the nursery was very concerned. And really, School Streets doesn't cover nurseries, so I haven't really been able to assist, really, except to suggest that she continue to talk to parents, because they're the ones dropping off, and obviously it's their children that are at risk. So it's very good to hear that we're having this conversation.
Thank you. And that is an interesting point as well, isn't it? Councillor Macro, is that something that you're aware of having come up, talking about preschool nurseries and
preschool? Yes, in my ward.
So I meant as part of the rapporteur role, I suppose, really, and whether that's something
so that's something that can be, because education starts from as soon as they.
Yeah, and parking problems outside settings also.
And children learn road sense by walking or scooting or cycling, so. Yeah.
It's an interesting one to add into the scope, I think. Yeah, Councillor Northover.
Thank you. I think until about last year I was on environment and place, and we had some really good reports about this that were very full and had a lot of research and consultation data. So it feels a little bit like we're repeating something that maybe has been done quite fully somewhere else, unless my memory's failing me and it was a lot longer ago or something like that. But I feel like there's some really good reports that aren't that old that we should be looking at, because I also feel like when we were talking about the school streets, that was quite accepted and established as the way that we deal with the problems outside school. I feel like we're almost going back a little bit and trying to make a case again that I thought we'd already made, actually.
Okay, well, this hasn't come up in the time since, obviously, Councillor Chapman brought this to the board a few months back, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And that hasn't come up, but I'll go and check, obviously, if there is. Yeah, Claire.
You are correct that it was looked at quite extensively. It was quite some time ago now by Environment Place, but school streets, and that's the issue, in that this is wider and encompasses other methods of getting to school and the enforcement aspect as well, which I think Councillor Chapman will always specifically looking at, and the resources for that.
That's a good point, and the focus of this being on the parking, because parking falls within our remit, whereas other transport things like school streets don't. So I think that's important for us to remember, that our lens is that parking and parking enforcement bit, because that's our remit. But I appreciate that there's obviously loads of overlap, and we need to make sure that we're not just repeating things that other committees have already done. Yeah, thank you. I had Councillor Aikenhead, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Rice. Yeah.
Yes, the first thing that struck me about this is that there's a lot of really good workers going on, and I think it's really useful that this was wider than just the school streets, because it shows that there are several different approaches that can be taken, and even things like the parents' parking promise, which you think it's only voluntary, but that might be something that would work for smaller children in a nursery, because it's something where the parents knows that they want their individual child to be safe. So I think it's quite good to have some different best practices and not just one. And I live quite near to a school, so I do see this problem sometimes actually happening. So I was kind of thinking where, in terms of where to go from here, it's quite an overlapping issue, and you've got the parking aspect, which is where we're looking at it from. You've also got the environmental aspect, which is the place committee, and also you've got the children's aspect because it's schools, it's education. And I can't help thinking that looking at all of this, that actually um, the actual schools is a really key part of it, that no matter how much we try and put more and more enforcement, I think it's good that we've got enforcement going on, but more and more enforcement isn't going to change the way people act, but education is more likely to. And so I really like the fact that what we've got here is a lot of initiatives that are designed to try and change the practice, and to combine it with the fact that yes, there's the parking and safety aspect, but there's also the aspect of children being taken into school to the doorstep in the car means they're not getting any exercise, they're not they're going to be less healthy. So if they can be encouraged to walk further, to walk or cycle, it means that that's good. It's kind of a double thing. So I do wonder if any next steps with this, we ought to be thinking about the fact that it's kind of starting to stray out of our parking area and into the schools area, and whether we ought to be getting the committee for that involved in it. In terms of what we can do, I think that we've got some great ideas, and I would just be asking the question, are all the schools aware of all the ideas? So is there some way we can get all of the information we've got and make sure all of the schools know what the choices are? Can we make sure that we as a council are encouraging them to do these things, so we're sort of celebrating success? If a school is done really well in encouraging a good percentage of their children to walk to school, for instance, are we celebrating that? Are we saying this is a great thing to do? How about other schools doing the same? Do we help to facilitate between the schools? Can they get together and share ideas with each other? So I'm kind of thinking those things are not really scrutiny for us to do. They're things the council could do to help schools to tackle the problem. So yeah, those are just kind of some ideas. Have we got also one thing that we could do a bit of scrutiny on is, do we have any way of measuring how schools are doing with this? So if we're going to celebrate success, what does success look like? Can we make some goals? And I do appreciate that every school's different. Some schools it's going to be more challenging than others. Maybe they've got children who are further away, but at the same time, maybe the schools had set their own goals. But having a goal, something to aim for, is a great way to try and get something done. If each school were to set their own goal for what percentage of children are going to walk or cycle to school, and then when they meet that goal, we celebrate it. So those are kind of just some ideas to put out there.
Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. And you were asking a couple of questions there that I know a little bit about this. We recently had a school street introduced in Moordown. There is a team that work on this stuff, and I believe they do communicate with every school regularly around, different options, different campaigns, different sort of things that are on the table. But I would suggest it would be worth potentially asking a representative from that team to join us when we look at this item, to kind of talk us through some of those things. And particularly, I think they could probably answer about whether there are any targets, any goals already in place, or whether that's something that we could look at putting forward as a recommendation. Yeah, I think that would be good. Councillor Rice.
Yes, I can appreciate your points in terms of whether it's straying sort of more into a children's and school streets area. But I think for me, I am interested in continuing some very specific stuff that's related to enforcement. Having spoken to Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law, there are some specific things in terms of how the enforcement officers currently work, and some simple changes in terms of what time they turn up at a school that may help with creating a shift in the enforcement, the success of the enforcement. And that is something very simple that I would like to work with Councillor McCrae on before February potentially. And yeah, in terms of the school streets, I think like there is a funding issue with the school streets being rolled out. There is an ambition to get a school street at every primary school. It is possible to do them at nurseries, but it's much more difficult because a lot of nurseries are smaller. But sometimes you've got a nursery linked to a primary school. It requires quite a significant amount of funding to do the traffic regulation orders to get the school streets and the engagement. And so I see this more as a sort of a temporary thing whilst we're getting those in place to try and shift culture just a little bit towards the responsibility that parents driving cars need to be protecting children, rather than sort of all of the education stuff that sometimes is aimed at children. You look after yourselves. Actually, it's the responsibility of adults driving a heavy vehicle that should bear that responsibility. And so I think I would be really keen that there's just a little bit more work done on this and brought back.
Great, thank you, Councillor Rice. And I saw Councillor Macro nodding when you said you'd like to work with her, so it sounds like that's welcome. And that would be great. I think personally we do need to keep that focus on the parking enforcement, because that was the original lens that we brought this topic in. It does bring in these other things, these other parts, that you can't kind of look at this one thing in isolation, because the solution to part of the solution to dangerous parking outside schools is to reduce the car usage, to and then you get into all the ways of doing that. So that brings in these bits that fall slightly outside of our remit. But I think we do need to keep focused on the parking enforcement bit, which is technically our area. So I think I've got quite a few notes here. I think I've got a fairly good idea of what we should be doing in terms of between now and February, bringing various officers in and putting a call out to the schools to see if any of people from the schools or from the governors would like to come and talk to us about this topic. Councillor Goodall, I'm sorry, you raised your hand.
Worry
Go
not.
ahead.
Forgive me if this is a bit stream of consciousness, but one of the things that I have two schools, Ocean Academy and St Peter's in my ward. I also have a friend who's a wheelchair user, and she takes her son to school. He's 10 and can walk perfectly well, but the number of 4x4s that are parked on the pavement, so she can't use the pavement to take her son to school. And it's very difficult with the nature of her machine to get off the pavement onto the roads, and she shouldn't have to do that anyway. And I get quite angry about that, but that's another story. I'd really like to, as far as asking about parking, there's two issues. One of them is getting some of the parking officers in here to be scrutinised, because there are other issues that I want to apply as well, and we are going to review parking later, and it's on our work schedule, mainly because, and I'm sorry if I'm going off at a bit of a tangent, mainly because I've got issues in Parr Street with the pubs and people parking on double yellow lines and so on and so forth, and the area is absolutely rammed and it's not safe. I also would really like to ask about this issue of legal limitations, because at the moment what happens is, as I understand it, if you've got double yellow lines, then a parking attendant or a CEO has to give somebody 5 minutes in order to be there and then move their car if they turn up. But on the other hand, if you've got double yellow slashes on the pavements and it's there's no loading or anything like that, they can issue a ticket immediately. So this is an issue of carrot. carrot and stick. The only other thing I wanted to say was that both Emily Harmon and myself have been to St Peter's to talk to the headmistress, and this issue of children and safety and what's happened with the governors. The school is constantly working on this. This is an ongoing problem, and I'm less forgiving than some, and especially, for instance, at the Ocean Academy, the co-op just round the corner from us at the bottom of Constitution Hill is rammed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with parents waiting in order to get in order to pick up their kids after school. So and obviously they come out of school, walk up the road to the co-op, and then off they go. But it's not making life easier for the residents. Anyway, sorry, that was my 10 pence worth. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the pavement parking in particular is an interesting one to keep in our minds as well. You're right, we have got parking strategy on our work plan as yet unallocated with a date, but when we come on to work plan item, I'm going to suggest we put a date on that. So the wider issue around parking issues potentially can be picked up on that. We have scoping on the parking strategy in terms of what we're looking at there. But I think we need to keep this one to the schools because that was the original intention of this particular topic. Yeah. Okay. Did anyone else? Councillor Macro, yeah.
I would like to thank Councillor Chapman-Law because this is an important issue, being a parent myself, and there's been many a time that I've thought of putting my angry mum pants on, and it's the fundamentals of don't park there.
Thank you. And yeah, you're right. Thanks to Councillor Chapman-Law for the work he's done on this up to now. And thank you to yourself for taking it on. And I think between us we can bring this through to the as a full item for our discussion in February. So I'm quite happy with that. If everyone else is good, then I think we can move on. The final item on our agenda tonight then is our work plan. The updated work plan was circulated with the agenda. I have no additional item requests to share with you, but I did notice myself that the March meeting has yet to be populated with any items, and I had a look at the list of items that haven't been allocated. I suggest that the parking strategy item is ready. It has the key lines of inquiry, it's been scoped, and our officers have agreed. So I think that one we can put forward onto the March agenda if everybody's agreeable. Does that sound okay? People happy with that? Yeah. And the other one that at the moment we could put forward for March is the one on bids, but that one does need a little bit more work. So it's if I can ask you to have a look at it on the work plan, there's an item about bear with me, business improvement districts, to consider issues raised by the bids operating within BCP. This was requested in June 2025 as there was an existing item for issues arising from the preceding briefing from the bids which hadn't been progressed. Now, I'm very happy to take this forward, but I don't have a lot more information than that to go on at this point. So if anybody did have thoughts, I'm not suggesting you would do it now, but if they had specific issues in mind or any thoughts about what this needed to look at, I'd be grateful if you could get in touch with me and we could talk about it.
Do you still have the list of things that were? Sorry. Do we still have the list of things that were brought up at that meeting? We invited the bids to come and talk to us.
No, I don't believe we do. So that's why I'm kind of putting the call out really to anyone who might have any particular thoughts on that. But we can say we'll schedule it for March for now and look into it a bit further. If we discover that we've got nothing to do, then we won't do it.
Well, one thing that we could do is ask the bids to come and let us know if they think things have improved.
Yeah. For example?
Because this item is a follow-up from the fact that we had basically we had somebody from each of the bids came and did a presentation. It's very helpful because it meant that we could find out what they do. But also they did talk about what could the council do for us and what could the council do better. And that was taken away by the council leadership at the time. So rather than just them coming and telling us what they've done about it, it might be good to actually ask the bids how then feeling, to update us how they're feeling about their relationship with the council now.
Yeah.
What can we do to improve? Yeah.
That seems a reasonable approach. Anybody had any other thoughts on that? Councillor Rice.
Well, it was just, if we haven't got the list, that we could always, somebody could watch the recording of the meeting to see what it was. I do remember the meeting, but I can't remember the specific outcomes. But I don't think they were particularly simple things as far as I remember. So I would probably just be thinking that, I don't know, like why, like more information about why the leader has suggested bringing that here, and maybe March is a bit early, before making a definite recommendation to have it on the March one.
Well, as I said, it would just be putting it on for now. We don't have to absolutely stick to that. There's a bit of time, but it would just be starting to prepare and seeing if that was appropriate. It may not be, but that was my suggestion of the things that need to be looked at in terms of dates. And we are, as we've talked about already tonight, we are doing some work programming, so things will start to sort of fall into place a bit more after that. So our next board meeting is the budget scrutiny meeting. There's one item on the agenda, which is the budget, as you would expect. And then after that, in February, we have the parking that we've just spent some time talking about. We also have the crime and disorder scrutiny of the Community Safety Partnership, which should have come to this meeting. I should have probably touched on that earlier. The reason it didn't was because none of the partners other than BCP Council were available to come, and we felt that having a discussion of a partnership without any of the partners there was probably not our best way to do it. So that's been rescheduled for our 23rd of February meeting. Okay. Is there anything else anybody wanted to raise around the work plan? Or are we happy with that? Okay. Oh, and I've got here to remind you about our local plan briefing, which we asked to have a briefing on progress on the new local plan. That is scheduled for Monday the 26th of January at 5 or 6?
5 o'clock, I think.
At 5 o'clock, I think. Should all be in all your calendars anyway. Okay, I think that's everything. In which case, thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and I'll close the meeting.